Welcome to WagerTalk, weekend of February 24th and 25th. Big show tonight. We welcome back a couple of friends to the mix. Lou of GambLou fame will join us to talk UFC on Fox 28. We'll also check in with our good friend Aaron Brewski regarding the stretch drive in the NBA. Quick note before we jump into some weekend college baskets. You can now listen to the show on iHeartRADIO. Pretty cool, and we're happy to be on board. But without further ado, I'm Scott Spreitzer. Dave Cokin is the man under the hat at the far end of the studio. For those of you who are not tuning in, videoly, I'm making up words. Marco D'Angelo sits between us.
I'm at the south end of the studio.
South end of the studio. Yeah. Well, actually, you're at the north end, but okay. Marco D'Angelo is in between us here. And, of course, Mark Seidel at the controls. I'm Scott. And, guys, again, we're going to kick off a busy show. We're going to get right to it. We've got college basketball, big games to talk about on Saturday, starting with the matchup between Kansas and Texas Tech. The Red Raiders whipped Kansas at Fog Allen. You'll remember back in January, 85-73, but they've dropped each of the last two games, while Kansas, they've gone on a little bit of a heater. And, Dave, Tech has watched their last two opponents shoot a lot more free throws than they have. That's been a problem. That's been the difference in the games. But they are nasty, stingy at home on the defensive end.
Stay healthy, Red Raiders, because their best guy is a little bit dinged up, and you don't really want to take any chances in what, honestly, they're meaningless regular season games at this point. The conference tournament is important from a pride standpoint and maybe a seeding standpoint. But these games at the tail end of the regular season for Kansas and Texas Tech, they don't really mean a whole lot. And you do have to factor that into your analysis. First thing you would look at here is, boy, this is a big revenge game for Kansas. They got drilled on their home court. They trailed the entire 40 minutes against Texas Tech. It was 23-7 early, and Tech just basically coasted from there.
Killed them on the glass.
Yeah, I mean, the Jayhawks would love to avenge that, but how important really is it for them? I don't think it is, and that's part of the reason that I won't be looking at the dog particularly here, and I won't be looking at the favorite either. I make Texas Tech about a 2.5-point favorite here. Again, not knowing the status of their best guy.
Yeah, that's about where I made it, about the same line. I do think there's a little more importance than normal in this spot because Kansas has won every Big 12 championship going all the way back to when they were the Missouri Valley about 115 years ago. They just keep winning championship after championship regular season. Tech, as you mentioned, as we all mentioned just now, they beat them already in January, but they're a game behind Kansas in the standings. If they win this one, they're tied atop the standings, Marco, and they're 2-0 on Kansas on the season. So I do think there's a little bit more than normal to this late season game.
You stole my thunder there. I was going to jump in there. I don't disagree with Dave too often, but this is a monumental game because the last time Kansas didn't win, the Big 12 conference, the three guys behind the mic all had hair.
Seidel, you and Dave.
Nothing goes back that far.
So I look at this one, and Texas Tech, they lost again Wednesday night. We're taping on Thursday, so it's going to change the line slightly, and I think it's going to swing the line to Kansas here. And the public's going to jump on the Kansas bandwagon because they beat West Virginia, and I'll talk about that West Virginia game in a second. I'm a little bitter about that, so I got to have a little – we'll call it my 30 seconds of therapy. But the last game against Oklahoma, they put up 104 points, and the public's going to overreact to that 30-point blowout over Oklahoma. Forget about it. Oklahoma is not the same team they were in the first half of the season. Oh, my gosh.
Can I just jump in for a second? Are they going to even make the NIT? They're 16-11.
This is amazing.
He's lost this team, as you pointed out, Dave, a while back.
I tweeted, probably about 2 months ago. I was watching Oklahoma, and I said, boy, this really looks like a team that's got a shot to make the Final Four.
Sure.
They might not make the Final Four of the CBI at this point.
It's looking bad. Wow. We kind of talked about this on the radio show, Las Vegas Sports Line, and then Marco, I'm sorry, we'll get right back to you, but I was going to say we were talking about this over the last week or so. And it looks as though, we all know Lon Kruger and what he can do as a coach. But I'm wondering if the other players around Trey got to a point where it's like, okay, we're just standing around. He's taking 55 shots a night. He's always got the basketball. And they got frustrated.
Like everything was designed for him.
Yeah, and it's like, hello, we're over here, waiting for a pass once in a great while. And it's almost like they've bolted away from Lon and also Trey Young, and have kind of gone off in another direction. And whatever has happened, they just can't win a game right now, Marco.
No, we made the comment on Friday last week when you and I did the show, Dave, that I said with Trae Young, it's almost like the Kobe Bryant factor. Remember how the Lakers are better when Kobe scored less because more people were involved, and that's what's happening to Oklahoma. But getting back to Kansas, I'm throwing that game completely out because Oklahoma quit in that game, and I always say no team's as good as their best game, nor are they as bad as their worst game. But let's go back to the West Virginia game. That is probably the most misleading final score of a game that we have had all year. West Virginia led that game from pillar to post, and yes, I had money on West Virginia, and I'm bitter about it. They went the last 4 minutes of the game. They scored 4 points in the last 4 minutes.
And some of that was their fault.
Yeah,
some of that was their fault. They weren't getting any calls from the refs in that game. And
that's the biggest understatement of the year. I'm with you there, man. No calls from the refs.
35-2 difference at the foul line in attempts, and at the end of the game, Huggins exploded, got the technical.
That was after a completely missed call on an obvious Kansas foul.
Which sealed the fate. The technical sealed the fate at that point. He lost it. So, I'm not sold that Kansas is back. I think Texas Tech, this is the game that Texas Tech comes to play. They have a chance to steal the Big 12 championship for the first time in how many years. But I'll say this much, and I like Texas Tech here, and I'll be on Texas Tech. If they lose this game Saturday, you can fade Texas Tech the rest of the season until they get to the conference tournament. I think then it will be like you say, Dave. What do they have to play for?
A couple of games left.
Yes.
Yeah. They. I'll say this much: if they are, you're thinking maybe Kansas short favorite.
Yes.
I'll be on Texas Tech. If they're not laying, my power ratings say 2.5.
My power ratings say Texas Tech too, but because of what happened in the last two games with both teams and the way the public loves Kansas, I think that we're going to get.
I hope you're right.
I think we're going to get right.
And the reason I say this, it's not on my numbers.
Right.
The odds makers rarely stray far away from Ken Palm.
Sure.
Okay, I mean, they want to keep it somewhere in that range. It might be a 2 or 3 point difference, but he's got Texas Tech 4 on Saturday against Kansas State. So
what do you adjust
against Kansas?
The guy's
so I don't
up.
think that'd be more than a 2 point adjustment.
I was just going to say, what do you drop it to? Maybe because it's Kansas, maybe they're 1 if he doesn't play. Maybe a 3 point adjustment. That's a lot, though.
I don't think. I don't think it's more than 2.
Yeah. Well, I hope you're right. I really do because that will be a play for sure.
My power rating is Texas Tech too.
Yep. All right, guys, we got Gonzaga. They're playing in San Diego as we speak. BYU, they're on the road at Portland as we speak. But those two teams, BYU and Gonzaga, will meet at Provo, Utah on Saturday. My ratings say Gonzaga 10. Not a line, that's my ratings. Marco, going into Thursday, the Zags had won 9 in a row since that loss to St. Mary's. That was at home. They avenged that loss at St. Mary's not too long ago, but they're just 2-9 against the spread in the last 11 games.
Yeah, when you're the team that's the cream of the crop every year in the same conference, you're going to pay a price if you want to back them. It's just, goes without saying. The thing is, BYU is the type of team that is going to slow the game down. And that's the only shot they have in this game. Because you look at this Gonzaga team, and they are built to go deep. This is a team, they're 7 players deep. They have 7 players on this roster that play 20 minutes or more. They have 6 players that score double digits. Mm-hmm. They don't rely on one guy. They don't have that superstar player that they rely on. So if one guy's having the off night, they got a whole slew of other guys to pick it up. Whereas for BYU, they've got 2 main guys that do all of the scoring for them. And everything goes through Elijah Bryant, the guard. He's their top scorer, 17.7 points per game, but he's also their top guy in minutes played, 34 and a half minutes per game. If he has an off night, they're in trouble because, like I said, they get all of their scoring from 2 guys. I think they have a chance here. Last home game, slow it down. They hung with Gonzaga in the first game Gonzaga. Yep. And generally, I like to take the road favorite in the second game whenever they did that. But for Gonzaga, it's just go through the motions. Don't get hurt. Get to the Big West Conference Finals or the West Coast Conference Finals and meet up against St. Mary's, beat them again, and go on to the big dance.
St. Mary's goes to the NIT with their 26-5 record.
I make Gonzaga on my numbers 7.5. I think it comes a shade lower than that because BYU is going to get – BYU always gets support from the bettors here. Okay, this is still pretty solid
especially
BYU
at
country.
Marriott Center.
Yes, and let's face it, there's a lot of BYU people in Las Vegas, and going back to their days in the Mountain West, they've always been popular at the windows. And, let's face it, BYU gave them a good game the first time around. It's a tie game with just over 3 minutes to play before Gonzaga got them at the finish line. And the Cougars are going to be really fired up for this game. Not that it's going to make a difference in an at-large resume or anything like that. They're not going to get to the NCAA tournament unless they win the Big West. Excuse me, I did the same thing you did, the West Coast Conference. I think they're more likely going to be an NIT team because they're a good draw. They have a good record. They'll be at home for maybe a few games in the NIT. But this is still the biggest game of their schedule, and I think they're going to give Gonzaga a contest here. Let's see what the odds makers do with it because they might tip their hand. If this game comes 6 or lower, the odds makers are giving a little indicator that they're begging for Gonzaga money, in which case you might want to look a little more seriously at BYU. If the line comes where I make it, about 7.5, it's probably a pass. If it comes higher than that, then I think I would probably go ahead and take BYU on value.
To the SEC, Auburn's at Florida on Saturday. The Tigers camped out at the top of the conference, 2-game lead over Tennessee. Big game for Florida, Dave. They're just 17-11 on the season, but one of 6 teams tied for third best record in the conference right now at 8-7. My power ratings might not be as big as some. I actually make this Auburn 2.5 points better in Gainesville at Florida. And I've heard some people I've talked to a little bit in the last couple of days looking at this game that actually have it another 1.5 higher as far as their power ratings with Auburn.
With the injury, I think I like your number a little better. Yeah. Because, look, Auburn lost a key guy, okay? It didn't matter against Alabama as they just shredded them last night in a revenge game. And that was that's important here. That was a real big game for Auburn because they'd lost the first meeting to Alabama. That's their chief rival.
Sure.
And they took care of business last night. The problem is that even though you can look at this and say, well, it's a little bit of a letdown spot for Auburn, and Bruce Pearl's such a fiery guy, he's able to get his team to play even in letdown situations. And what I don't like about Florida is what we saw again last night. Their offense at times, it just sucks, okay? It just bogs down. Chioza either gets out of control or just isn't making the right entry passes. And Florida also went bad from the foul line last night. And that was a game they should have won at Tennessee, or at least could have won, and ended up losing by 5. And they lost the game because they couldn't make free throws. I think they ended up 9 for 16 in the game. You can't do that, and they did. I don't trust this Florida team. I mean, this is a spot to me that says, Florida's the right way to play here. I don't trust them, and I'm not going to play the game. I mean, if I were forced to play it, I guess I'd take Florida. But the good news is this. 6,444 games on Saturday, so a lot to choose from. And this is not going to be on my card.
And we got to handicap every single one of them. Marco, I'll tell you what, I'm kind of with Dave here because, the Florida Gators, you look at their home numbers, they're just not as dependable as you would hope a team of this so-called caliber or supposed caliber is at home. They've lost 3 of the last 5 at home. They're only 10-5 on the season at home. They don't shoot well at home.
They don't have a go-to guy.
No, that's the problem. That's nobody to take over when everybody else needs a charge.
At this level, I think you need a go-to guy, and they don't have one.
Well, they're not playing good basketball at all. Yeah. This is a team that in their last 7 games, they've shot 42% or less from the field in 5 of the 7 games. They're 1-5-1 against the spread over the last 7. And, a lot of people are going to look and want to take Florida. If they come the small dog, they're going to look and say, hey, Auburn lost their last road game at South Carolina. They're going to try to say they're a little bit comparable. South Carolina they had a couple things going for them. South Carolina is a bigger team inside, and that's one way you can give Auburn some problems. We did a video today at WagerTalk, and Ralph brought that out, that 2 of the teams that gave Auburn problems this year, both were teams that had a lot of size. But I pointed out what also was working in that South Carolina game was the sandwich of all sandwich games. We used to do our sandwich spot. They were coming off the win over Kentucky. Granted, Kentucky's not vintage Kentucky that we're used to over the last several years, but it's still the name Kentucky, and they're still the king in the SEC till somebody dethrones them. And that was a huge win for them. You come off Kentucky, and you have your arch rival Alabama on deck in a revenge spot. It's a look-ahead spot at South Carolina. So I throw that game completely out, and I just don't like the way Florida's playing. A lot of people are going to say, well, Florida's desperate right now. They need a signature win, and they need a very deep run in the SEC tournament to even sniff it, possibly getting an at-large, which I don't think they have a shot. But I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to lay it with Auburn here. I think they're the better team. And they put up 90 points on Alabama. Alabama is a damn good defensive team.
Listen, if it wasn't for the issues off the court, Pearl's National Coach of the Year.
Oh, absolutely.
That stuff will cost him. He won't win.
He's got a lot of stuff to get over his head.
Phenomenal job. Phenomenal.
Oh gosh, wherever he goes.
Look, you go back to the beginning of the season, right before the start of the season, and it looked like, well, he's going to get fired. That's it. He's going to be out because of all this stuff. Well, from day one, this team is unified with him at the helm. He is a terrific game coach. He's been that going back to his Wisconsin.
He's top five,
this guy,
I think, as far as winning games.
Coach.
The problem is you're going to get some kind of problem with the NC2A
I know.
at every stop. He's going to win you 25 games a year. He's also going to get you in a little bit of trouble. That's Bruce Pearl. I mean, but you're absolutely right. Excellent coach. Good stuff, guys. We're going to each have a best bet at the end of tonight's show. Still to come a little bit later, Aaron Brewski with all things NBA. Going to be good to have Aaron back on the show, a good friend of ours. Coming up next, though, after the break, GambLou breaks down UFC on Fox 28 Saturday night's card. Stick around.
It's Manic Monday, and that means every pick at WagerTalk.com is just $9. Get a play in any sport valued at up to $30 for just $9 each and every Monday at WagerTalk.com.
Welcome back to the show. Dave and Marco here. I'm Scott Spreitzer, Aaron Brewski with all things NBA coming up in just a bit. Also, best bets still to come. But right now, we're joined by a friend of ours and one of the premier UFC bettors around. He is Lou of @GambLou fame. Check him out on Twitter. Lou, thanks for joining us on Wager Talk, my friend.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to come and talk with you guys, especially since the last opportunity I had right at the turn of the year was a great card, and we didn't have a very good result. So the ears are pinned back to try and load up a couple of decent underdogs for the listeners and the Wager Talk viewers.
Your reputation is a great one, and rightly so. So we'll let you have that one little blip on the map. I've had a couple of those the last couple of days in college basketball, so I know how that goes sometimes. Lou, let's start with the main event. Jeremy Stevens, about $1.65 favorite over Josh Emmett, and Emmett surprised many with the KO win over Ricardo Lamas a couple of months ago. But his path to victory isn't normally of the knockout variety. He's a strong wrestler, and Stevens, has only stopped a couple of fighters the last 3+ years in his right. I got a feeling this fight's going to last a while. Your thoughts?
Well, even though Stevens hasn't stopped anyone in the last few visits, out of his 24 or so professional fights, 17 do come by way of KO. So he has tremendous power and a sure power edge over Emmett and an experience edge. First of all, Emmett was a short notice for his last fight against Lamas, and he came in a little overweight, which I believe was a slight advantage. More so the advantage was that it was really short notice for Lamas fighting a different kind of player in Emmett. And I believe Lamas, though at the time a top 5 rated fighter, in my handicapping, he's really not quite that good. And so Emmett's, the recency that we see behind Emmett, I think has to be taken with a grain of salt because when we really look close at his game, yes, he is a competent wrestler, and competent wrestlers have shown to give Stevens some trouble. But what I find most alarming with Emmett, quite honestly, is his strike defense. And that's an important thing when you're facing a power player like Jeremy Stevens that really does have dynamite in each hand.
Do you think that's a good line then at $1.65, Stevens being the favorite, or do you think that maybe it should be a little bit higher and we're getting value with the chalk?
Yes, actually, this was a fight that I released earlier in the week at 145 to 150, and I do believe as we get closer to the fight, there could be some Emmett action. I do think that if you're a Stevens guy, I like the price and I like his experience, and I also like the fact that in a day and age when the UFC is looking for TV a new TV partner, and they're really looking for stars. A big, huge, heavy-hitting, undersized guy like Stevens might fit the bill.
Co-main event, Lou, is Torres against Jessica Andrade, and I like Andrade, for the most part. I mean, she's a $3 favorite here, so you're not getting any favors behind the counter on this particular fight if you like her. But she's 4-1 since moving to strawweight. She's looked good against basically everybody not named, Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Torres likes to throw kicks, by the way, in combos. Is there any reason at all we should back the underdog in this one, or is she just simply outclassed here?
Philosophically speaking, the wrestler is kryptonite to the Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and that's what you have here. However, all that said and done, Andrade is a unique young lady and really fared well in her loss to Joanna Champion and absolutely dominated a dangerous girl in the division in fellow Brazilian Claudia Gadelha. And so I really think Tisha Torres is a capable young fighter. I don't see anyone finishing this fight, but I do see a clear decision Andrade. And for a guy that likes to try and fish in underdog waters, this is a fight I'll pass on.
I'm going to ask you for two fights that, GambLou's money is going to be on in just a minute. But I got to ask you about one more because I was going to back Angela Hill on the prelims in this card. But, she's gone from $1.15 all the way up to $1.60. I've seen her as high as $1.60. You can shop around and get it for a few pennies less if you do still like Hill. But, it kind of eliminates this from being a best bet because I missed the better price. Do you believe Hill is still worth plunking down a few bucks at this big of a price?
No, I'm not a believer in Angela Hill, to be quite honest. Her last fight was a loss to the gal Ansaroff, who's a ground fighter, and she faces another ground fighter in Marina Moroz here. This is the striker versus grappler ground fighter kind of a matchup. And in the numbers that we track as analytics creeps further and further into all of our sports, we're tracking in the UFC since its inception fighters with a greater than 5-year youth advantage. And in this case, Moroz is 27, Hill's 32, so she matches. At 65% of the time, the younger fighter wins. So for my money, I would be looking at Moroz as a capable underdog here, especially with the money flowing in on Hill. But that's not a fight on my radar, to be quite honest.
Well, I appreciate your opinion, though, because, like I said, I missed Angela Hill when she was $1.15 at a reasonable price, and I certainly don't want to jump in, 40, 45 cents higher, especially when you break it down like that and you give us that long-term metric, so to speak, on fighters and how they do when they're 5 years or more older than their opponents. Good stuff. Is there a couple of fights that you will be getting serious with your bankroll?
Yes, there absolutely is, and we'll go back up to the main card in the fight with Ovince St. Peru and Latifi, the Swedish sledgehammer. Now, St. Peru looks the part. He's an ex-defensive end from Tennessee, and he's a 6'3", 34-year-old athletic football player that has made the transition into learning the business of MMA. Latifi, the Swedish anvil, is exactly that. He's not even a fire hydrant. He's shorter. He's 5'10", 205, and he's really thick. He's explosive, and he realizes himself at 33 years old that it's getting time for him to put up or shut up. And really, in his most recent fight, he fought a guy named Pedro, who just was recently on the Australia card and looked well in his finish of his opponent. Latifi ragdoll Pedro, who, by the way, happened to be, 6'3", athletic and a ground fighter. St. Peru's athletic, but he has a lot to learn in the UFC, and Latifi's going to have to work to get inside that long, striking jab as well as the kicks of St. Peru. But I do believe he'll get in, and I believe even though this is St. Peru's hometown and his backyard, I like Latifi at any kind of a plus price, and I think you're seeing him at plus $1 and a nickel or plus 110 right now.
Give us one more, and then we'll let you get away, Lou.
last one will be the main event on the preliminary card, which is Keller against Barao. And Barao has had dynamic issues trying to make 135. He's gone to a new gym, AT&T, and proclaimed himself a changed man. I've been used to, in my research, finding that when you're jumping gyms, it's not necessarily a good sign. And so I really do, even though Keller is nothing special, kind of a grinder grappler who's very good on the floor, Barao's going to want to keep this standing and use his length. I do look for Keller to be very competitive in this fight, and what I'll look at mostly is weigh-ins to see how Barao fares. First of all, if he can make 135, then what does he look like when he does? He's had dynamic troubles in his past doing it, and if he looks any kind of weak at all, I do believe Keller's a very live dog in this spot.
Top shelf information when it comes to UFC. Lou of GambLou fame. You can follow him on Twitter at GambLou and check out his tweets throughout the weekend when it comes to how the guys look and how the girls look when it comes to weighing in for this particular card. Hey, listen, Lou, you always have an open door invite, no matter what Marco says, by the way. You always have an open door invite to join us on Wednesdays when we tape for the weekend. Anytime you can come up and join us here in Las Vegas with Dave Cokin and I, would be more than grateful to have you on. We appreciate you being on tonight. We look forward to having you on many more times on the WagerTalk podcast.
Nothing but respect for all you fine handicappers. Thank you for the time, and I'll surely take you up on that. Thanks so much.
Good stuff, Lou. Best of luck this weekend with UFC on Fox 28. When we come back, Aaron Bruski, all things NBA. Stick around.
Every Tuesday, WagerTalk.com offers a best bet selection from its hottest handicapper. It's a great way to introduce yourself to WagerTalk.com with a big best bet winner for just $2 on $2 Tuesday.
Welcome back to Wager Talk. Scott, Dave, and Marco in studio. Best bet still to come, but right now we welcome a friend of ours. He's been with us for years on all the different radio shows and podcasts that we've done and covers all things NBA. I like this guy because he also gets it from a betting aspect. Great follow on Twitter at Aaron Bruski. He is Aaron Bruski. Aaron, not too far down the road, a few more NBA writers better be familiar with the gambling aspect. How you doing, man?
Man, you couldn't say it better, man. I'm really happy to see the growth in the gambling industry and how it's kind of gone mainstream here. I like to think we're a little bit ahead of the curve on that. So thank you very much for everything you've done to introduce me to everything in that industry. But, yeah, it's exciting times, and I think it's just going to get better.
There's a little kind of a negotiating back and forth right now between the pro sports leagues and the books because there's no way – and I'll just say this, and then we'll move on to talking about the Cavaliers and all that good stuff. But there's no way the sports books are going to be able to afford giving 1% of their hold to each of the pro sports leagues, including Major League Baseball, the NBA, the NFL, the NHL. They just don't hold enough as it is to make that happen. So there will have to be some definite negotiations that take place before it does become legalized. Back to the Cavaliers, though, Aaron. They're playing as we speak, hosting the Wizards. The trades were made last week or so. Gone are the malcontents. LeBron seemed quite happy going into the break with his new teammates. Do they have enough now to improve on those poor defensive efficiency numbers that really haunted this team first half of the season?
Yeah, I think they will improve on defense. They did get younger, more athletic. But I would caution your listeners, and I think there's value in this, that the PR machine, and sitting from where I sit, I get to see all this stuff happen. I've seen it happen for years. The PR machine was in high gear, and I don't think that it really matched the reality on the ground. Yeah, that team had quit on each other, but I think that the writing was on the wall for not just Isaiah Thomas, but a lot of guys in that locker room. And when you have that many guys whose heads are on the chopping block, it all just sort of bogged down. So after the trade, they were sort of able to release that energy, and I hope you guys bet on them coming out of that trade deadline. Those two games, they had all the energy in the world, and they're tied up at 46-60, or probably 46-46 right now against a limping Wizards team. I don't know that they're going to be as good as expectations heading down the stretch. They got a lot to figure out there, and I don't think that they found a silver bullet against the Warriors or anything like that.
Aaron, a team that I'm interested in that was involved in a lot of the trade with Cleveland and the other teams is the Lakers. This is a team that, I did a radio show the day after, and nice 3-0 so far with it, and I'm going to continue to ride it. bet the overs with the Lakers until Vegas adjusts. This team plays no defense before the break and before the trades, and now they may be the worst defensive team in the NBA. Do you agree or disagree?
I think that they're going to be a bad defensive team, but I also think that they got a great rhythm coming in with Isaiah Thomas. He has a way of playing well with players that are younger when he is the offensive focal point, and I think that this group, you look at Brandon Ingram and Julius Randle, they are just sort of coming into their own. I don't think they're going to be as bad defensively as it might seem looking at them in the individual pieces. And I had to double-check the standings because I thought, this team might actually be able to sneak up on some people, and they're obviously way too far back to make any sort of hay in the playoff chase. But I think they're actually going to take a couple steps forward here. That piece of Isaiah Thomas and playing next to Lonzo Ball, assuming his knee will not keep him off the floor longer, I think they'll actually be a pretty good fit next to each other. So I think they're going to be dynamic offensively. They'll sneak up on a bunch of teams. And I think their defense will be a little bit better than as advertised. So I do think that they're a team that you're going to want to look at down the stretch.
Tell you this much, that game on Friday night, first game out of the break for the Lakers, they're playing Sacramento, a team that Aaron has covered for several years. And that total, you're not getting any favors from the odds maker. It's 224. But, Marco, I'm with you. I play nothing but the over if I'm going to play that game coming out of the break. I got to ask you, Aaron, we got one bookmaker in town going back to the East for a minute, Jeff Sherman over at the Westgate Superbook, who feels Toronto is the team to beat in the East. Now, some say Boston, can bother the Cavaliers a little bit. I don't agree right now on the Celtics. Their offensive efficiency numbers are not great. I don't think they're going to be able to challenge Cleveland in a 7-game series. But can you get on board with the potential Toronto Raptors Eastern Conference Championship?
I can, and that's actually my favorite going out of the East right now. Their bench is very good, and their bench has allowed their starters to get some pretty key rest here over the last couple of weeks. I think this is a team that's overlooked, and I think this is a team that's actually comfortable with where they're at. I think that they've been beat up in the playoffs. They've learned a bunch of lessons, and they've changed their playing style, most importantly. So obviously they got to stay healthy, but once you've played with guys, Serge Ibaka's been with them for now over a year, and Jonas Valanciunas, I think he's gotten comfortable with what he is to that team. I just think they're a well-rounded team with some players that can give LeBron James a few different looks and be able to give him some trouble. But, at the end of the day, I think they got enough firepower and enough depth to withstand that kind of what-if situation if a player either goes down or just simply is having a bad series.
Aaron, I follow the Spurs and Coach Popovich, and I thought I would never be doing a radio show where I would be asking this question with a team like that. What is going on internally with the Spurs? Kawhi Leonard cleared to play, not going to play. You've got Pop saying he's probably done for the season. A lot of speculation of what's going on. We've never seen internal drama with the Spurs organization until this year. We had it earlier in the year with the other player, the name's slipping my mind right now.
You talking about Parker?
No. Aldridge?
Oh, yeah. LaMarcus Aldridge. Yeah.
And then now with the Kawhi, is this something moving forward? We got a concern with the Spurs going forward because this is uncharted territory.
Yeah, and it's kind of it might just be complete coincidence that the owner Peter Holt's also going through a divorce right now, so it's just kind of hitting them at every single angle. But this is an unprecedented situation. You got a top 3 NBA player who many thought would be pushing in the MVP race that has another year on his contract, an option after that. And this Spurs team, they gotten old. I don't think anybody really gave them a real chance this year. They don't really have a full stocked coffer for another run. There's a lot of talk that his uncle has sort of been a wedge between him and the team. And I think there's a lot of people that would like to see Kawhi Leonard out of a small market in San Antonio, namely shoe companies and the like. So I think he's facing a lot of pressure to get out of San Antonio, even if you just look at it from a competitive angle. And I also think that the Isaiah Thomas situation with his contract has freaked a lot of people out in the league. Isaiah lined up for something in the ballpark of, let's just be generous and say $20 million per year. And after a hip injury and after a tumultuous stay in Cleveland, there's a significant delta there. I wonder if the uncle or people in his camp are saying, hey, look, whatever you do, just don't mess this up, because you're looking at a massive payday. And then you also have to look at, well, where do you want to try to win championships at? It's crazy. It boggles the mind to think that somebody would look at the Spurs and say, hey, let's go away from that. But all their players have gotten older. Pop is probably the best coach of all time, and they're probably the best organization at turning things around. But a lot of people can get in a player's ear and say, hey, you know what, you can go to this team here that's got 3 superstars, and you can make a run at it, and you could get this contract. But whatever you do, just don't hurt your quad. And I think that's where he's at, probably still feeling a little bit of pain. But he's been medically cleared, and this story's been percolating amongst the elite of NBA reporters for at least a month, if not 2 months now. There's a lot to it, and I think there is some distance between those two camps.
Listen, I was going to ask you about Kawhi. I'm glad you guys brought this up, because I wanted to get your thoughts on this. And, Aaron, if you don't want people to know your real opinion on this, if you have to keep quiet on this, we'll only share it with the couple of million potential listeners on iHeartRADIO, so don't worry about it. But, he's got tendinopathy, which runs down from the top of the thigh down to the knee. And that's more of a disease, not like a life-threatening disease or anything like that, but that's more of a disease than it is a tendon pull or a tendinitis or things of that nature. So what is the word around the writers in the league? I mean, is this all drama, or is this a lot to do with something that maybe makes him less effective moving forward for the rest of his NBA career?
Yeah, I think it's the latter, and I think so. It's a mixture of both things when it comes to he's been medically cleared, but at the same time, he has this apprehension that this could worsen. And I think it does impact his future career, and that also would explain a little bit of the erraticness. I mean, just 2 games before he was shelved again, he was out there on the front lines talking about how he wanted to get more reps, more games in a row, and start to get into a rhythm, and more or less intimating that he was feeling good. And then, boom, shut down, and not a lot of reporting out of the local news, and not a lot of reporting out of his camp, obviously. To me, it reads like a player who's very, very concerned that he could get a drastically, we're talking a good, in Isaiah's case, the delta on his contract could easily be $60 million. And I think if Kawhi had something serious happen, the delta could be $80 million. I mean, it's hard to say if it was really serious how low he could go. He's obviously a much better player than Isaiah, but that's a ton of money. And when that level of money gets involved, I think a lot of voices get in his ear.
Yeah, it's kind of an off-the-wall question, Aaron, but, with the uncertain status of Leonard moving forward because of this problem, and the fact that the Spurs are, let's just say their window is pretty much closed, you think there's any chance Pop leaves after this year and, I don't know, makes a run for public office someplace? He's very, let's face it, he is politically involved.
Oh, absolutely. I don't get the sense that he would do that. But as far as, he's done everything that he needs to do in basketball. It is a grind. If this thing was to really turn south real fast and they were to go through an extensive rebuild, I don't know that he would, maybe he would groom somebody to take over for him. But I do think it would be a possibility. I would have to think that way. You've already done everything. It's a total grind, and a 3 to 5 year rebuild probably isn't enticing to somebody with his accolades.
And combine that with the fact that you still got the Golden State Warriors with a lot of young talent, and you've got LeBron, potentially ended up in L.A. That's a tough rebuild.
There's one of the offshores posted, I think was LeBron is a minus 300 to sign with the Lakers.
Yeah,
a lot of people think it's basically a done deal already. Now, I have no knowledge to that, so it's that secondhand information, but certainly there's a strong belief he's headed for Los Angeles.
Aaron,
well, at a minimum, there's a strong belief he's not going to be in Cleveland. I think that's safe to say.
Aaron, quick question on L.A. and, with the money that they've cleared, obviously that's a prime destination. How much of a factor with the sideshow that is LeVar Bell or LeVar Ball? Sorry, I'm thinking.
I thought you threw a new name on the roster.
There you go. But does that make it, unattractive for some people to want to go out there, because it is going to be a circus with him, especially if Lonzo, moves forward and becomes a bigger player?
I don't think Lonzo's going to go forward and become a bigger player. And I think this is a little bit, getting too deep into the big baller brand and all of that. But it all hinges on Lonzo being a very good NBA basketball player. He's got a long way to go. This injury hasn't helped his development out. And I think if he had, this banner season and LeVar was out there doing what he was doing, and the Lakers were still heavily invested in Lonzo Ball. I mean, we've gotten a sense over the course of this year that they're not nearly as invested as they once were. LeBron being LeBron and possibly the biggest name in all of sports, I don't see him even really thinking about what's going on with the Lonzo Ball situation. And I frankly would see the Lakers probably trading him. If they're going to get LeBron James, and here's kind of the comedic future, if you want to take a real long shot, I could see LeBron and Isaiah Thomas playing again if they decided to keep Isaiah Thomas around in L.A. I could absolutely see that happening. But, I don't think the Ball thing is going to be an impact on LeBron's decision.
No, the only problem with Ball is that if you want to trade him, you're basically trading the whole family. Mm-hmm. And look, let's call it straight. You've got one NBA player, one who might be an NBA player, and one who isn't even a D-League player. He's not, okay? One of the brothers, he's just not that good. And then you get the father. Who wants that baggage? And I got to tell you, I think that might be the biggest stumbling block to the Lakers getting LeBron, is the presence of Ball. I don't think he wants to be around it. I think he thinks they're a nuisance. I think he's right. And I think they might have to get him out of there before they can sign LeBron. That's just my opinion.
I think Lonzo ought to grow up here and tell his dad where he can go for a while. I mean, come on. At some point you got to grow up, and you got to be on the team or your daddy's boy. Make up your mind and get on with it. Couple of quick questions to ask Aaron before we let you get away. A little bit of the negative in the NBA, then a little bit of the positive. We're going to start. Well, I was really bummed this week. I like guys who complete the entire truth, as Mark Cuban did when it come to whether or not his team was tanking or not. I'm a fan of being honest when it comes to that stuff, but I'm not a fan of the fact that everybody knows about it after he says it, so you're not getting the good value with going against the Dallas Mavericks in the sports books. Even one of the guys we interviewed here the other day on a radio show in Las Vegas, one of the bookmakers here in town told us, boy, he was hating that because he was looking to play against the Dallas Mavericks. And now you got to factor in that public perception into the mix. Another team that hasn't spoken, at least their brass hasn't said this out loud because they don't want to be, over $500,000 lighter the next day. They haven't said it out loud, but their actions, trading Mirotic and getting nothing of substance in return, tells me that the Chicago Bulls are tanking the rest of the way.
Oh, they're tanking. They're tanking gloriously. I don't know if you guys will get the value out of it that you hope you will, because they're so obvious about it. I mean, They just sat not only Robin Lopez, but Justin Holiday's been one of their best players all year, and he has been pushed to the side. And that's the one that's really questionable because he's a younger player. It's not like he's really made it in the NBA, and he's being asked by management to sit out, a la Phoenix when they did that with Eric Bledsoe. And this is a blatant tank. They're going to play Cameron Payne, who hasn't really had any good NBA moments, and he's been injured the entire time. I think they can get real bad real fast because that's something I think the teams, they don't react all that well to. Though they're hanging with Philly right now at the half.
Well, let's end on a positive note. Aaron, I understand you're working on a new project to add to @Hoopball Tweets, which, by the way, is another great follow on Twitter. What's the new project you got going?
Well, we just released our new website, so it was a revision on the old website, and it just brings out the best of what we're doing right now. Namely, for people in your world, is the sports update, probably the NBA updates, where you can get real-time updates on players' injury statuses and get quick, bite-sized information that takes you behind the curtain and lets you know exactly what's going on with each team and gives you real betting angles. So that's, for us, is very exciting. We are dipping our toe into the gambling world as we go here. Of course, you guys have Dan Vespers on your shows from time to time, so we've got a real strong presence on that front. And we've stepped into team coverage where we're having journalists on the ground. It gives us a little edge when we can have a guy on the ground and go in there and get the coverage that we'd like. So those are the three things that we're bringing together. And with a new website, it's nice and sleek, and I've kind of fallen in love with it.
You hear about people who say they're a step ahead. Somebody they know, this guy's about 20 steps ahead of the rest of the NBA when it comes to the sports betting aspect of it. Great stuff. He's Aaron Bruski. Fantastic follow at Aaron Bruski. Check him out daily and nightly during the NBA season. Thanks a lot, Aaron. We're going to talk to you soon, I hope, and make this a regular thing for the rest of the NBA season.
I would hope so. You guys, it's great talking with you.
Great stuff. Aaron Bruski. Guys, when we come back, best bet time. You're listening to Wager Talk. Stick around. Welcome back to Wager Talk. Been a great show. Looking forward to having guys like GambLou and Aaron Brewski on with us throughout the next couple of months as we wrap up Wager Talk Podcast, which will at least take us through March Madness, maybe a little bit further. But right now, we're going to go to Best Bets. We'll start with the man under the hat, at Dave Cokin on Twitter. Dave, what do you got for us?
Looking forward to a real good weekend. And by the way, we'll mention this, nothing yet, but exhibition baseball is starting. And I mention that because I will be playing some exhibition baseball games. There is value to be had now in exhibition baseball games because you can get, this is kind of like preseason football, where years ago you really had to dig for information on games in terms of who's going to be on the field for how long and stuff like that. And, unless you had some good context, you just didn't get the information. Now, of course, it's commonplace. It's become that in baseball as well. You can go to the various team websites and get their rotations for the next day. And there is value to be had in exhibition baseball. They're not going to be big plays. You won't see any 5% plays, but I'm definitely going to get involved. Low volume at first, but we'll find little spots here and there. And, the money doesn't care where you make it.
That's what I always say, man. You might not like watching it, but if it cashes,
you
like where the money lands.
There's not much less exciting than exhibition baseball.
Unless you're there in person, by the way, which is an absolute blast.
Fine. Yeah. Actually, I like it. I like watching it because, you get the little conversations with the players, and it's just relaxed and it's fun. Anyway, that's not the main crux of the weekend. Obviously, we're going to have some big stuff out there at Wager Talk.
I want to jump in on your story about the exhibition baseball. I have bet one exhibition baseball game in my life.
Were you at the game?
We were at the game,
Yep.
Brian Leonard and me, and we go, and they put up the board right there, the lineups for both teams. And Brian, he's a guy that knows all of the prospects, okay? And he sees the board, and he goes, oh, my God. It was Seattle and somebody. We got to bet against this team. They're playing all, you got one team with the starters, the other team, he says, it's just tremendous value. We got to do it. We did it. They were up 6-0 right away.
Oh, I remember this. I remember this.
And then they started putting other guys in the game later. The one guy had 3 errors in right field, and one ball got in the corner, and you saw him go chase it down, and the other guy yelled, just go through the wall and go back to the minors. You're done. We lost that bet. That was my 1-0.
That's going to happen in some exhibition games.
And I remember you guys talking about, maybe you tweeted it out or something to do with social media, but I remember when that happened. I'll say this. I do actually dabble a little bit in exhibition baseball also. And if you're a Wager Talk, you understand our so-called scoring system as far as percentage of bets that you make, percentage of the handle that you make on per bet. It's anywhere from 2% to 5%. Right. My exhibition baseball is basically all 2%.
Yeah, same here.
Dave, I usually get involved probably after each team's played a good 5, 6, maybe even 7 games before I jump in.
Unless there's something outstanding the first week, I probably won't do much. But there will. And again, I'm not selling these as big plays. There'll be 2% plays because of what Marco just explained. But there's still, if you can get a 5-0 edge the first 3 innings, you're probably going to win.
Exactly.
As for this weekend, be some great stuff up, and for the best bet of the show. One of the games we talked about, I think BYU is going to be live against Gonzaga. I think they give them a real good battle. If you want to know more reasons, you can go back to the early portion of the show. I'm not going to just repeat it. But assuming a line somewhere in the 7 range, BYU plus the points.
Check him out at Marco in Vegas. He is one of the co-founders of WagerTalk.com. And want to get your best bet. Also want to find out if there's any specials going on at WagerTalk.com this weekend.
Well, we've got our head guy that takes care of all this stuff. He is on a cruise this weekend. So
what's his name?
Yeah, that Johnny somewhere.
I've heard of him.
Yeah, that town that's never won a championship in football.
Did you see what he social media'd out last? I say that because it's at a tweet or Facebook because I forget where it was.
But he's all over both of them.
Yeah, and he had a picture getting ready to go on the cruise. He had a picture of Caillou. Now, you guys don't have kids. When you got a kid and they're 3 years old, they're watching Caillou, which is this little bald 2-year-old that never ages, 2 or 3-year-old kid that never ages. It's an animation, a cartoon. And next to that, he had Homer Simpson eating a donut. Now, in between, he's got himself eating a donut. And of course, all three of a little bit follically challenged. And so anyway, he says, "Who do I look more? Who do I look like more? Do I look like Caillou or do I look like Homer?" And I told him, I had to tell him right there, and I told his lovely wife, Paula, I said, 7 years ago when I first met you, you looked like Caillou, but you really look like Homer nowadays, buddy. Eat that donut. And it was much appreciated by the wife, let me tell you that. But also, quick thanks to Johnny for getting us getting the show onto iHeartRadio. Did a great job on working on that, Marco.
Yeah, that's why he said he deserved a cruise. So, isn't it funny that he told us about that this week?
Yeah, as he had already bought tickets, and I think it was day one of the cruise, actually.
Yeah. So, if you're listening, Johnny, when you're putting this up on iHeart tonight, thanks, bud. And hope you're having a good time. We're going to be having my best bet. I'm going to go to Sunday with the NBA, and there's a game that I'm looking at. We've talked about all the changes with the Cavaliers. We talked about all the drama with San Antonio. I think San Antonio is going to come to play on Sunday. I think they're going to put a big effort together. It's a nationally televised game. I think the rest of the players there are going to show, hey, we're not quitting. We're here to play. They are in the end of what is known as the rodeo roundup for San Antonio that they have every year. 6 straight road games. But for them, because the NBA All-Star break was a little bit later, and we've got this, now that long week instead of just the 4-day break that we used to have, they're not as at a disadvantage as they normally are at the end of that road trip from the rodeo, because they only played 4 games of the trip before and 2 after, and they play 1 game before Sunday. Cleveland's going to play 3 games. Sunday will be their 3rd game. They play tonight, they play tomorrow, and then they play Sunday. I'm going to look at this one to go under. The one thing we talked about, the biggest difference we're going to see in the Cavaliers moving forward, in my opinion, is going to be the defense. This team got better defensively, getting rid of Isaiah Thomas. Doesn't play any defense at all. We know that. The rest of the team wasn't putting forth an effort. I think now the Cavs are going to play good defense, and you've seen the first couple games with the new players, teams, they're holding them into the low 40s, where all season long, teams were shooting over 50% against the Cavs. They were one of the worst defensively. The fact that it's Sunday, primetime game on TV with the Stars, LeBron, Vegas is going to put a couple extra points on that over-under because they know human nature in the public doesn't want to play LeBron and under. Sure. They want to play over. I'm taking this one under the total. I'm expecting it to be in the 212 range, and I look for this one. My numbers have it 207 or less. So as long as we're anywhere 210 or higher, we're good come Sunday. Go ahead and take the under. That's my best bet.
He's at Marco at Vegas on Twitter, of course, at WagerTalk.com, as is Dave Cokin, who's also on Twitter. He's at Dave Cokin. I'm at Scott Wins. And I'm going to go to the college ranks on Sunday, and I'm going to back the Nebraska Cornhuskers over Penn State. Weak performance in the home loss to Michigan on Wednesday night by the Nittany Lions. They were never really looking like the winning side in that particular game. That was their home finale. They've got little to play for in their regular season finale at Nebraska, other than garnering that 20th win of the season. They're 19-11 as we speak. They nipped the Huskers by 2 in overtime in January, and outside of rebounding, the game was as close as that score indicates in Happy Valley. Since that game, though, the Huskers have won 9 of 11. Close losses at Ohio State and at Illinois. But a big test I thought was passed the other night last time out when Nebraska was able to get it back together after the loss and control Indiana for the majority of that game and win the contest by 9 points. They're 14-1 at home. The only loss, they missed a last-second shot, a 1-point loss to the Kansas Jayhawks in Lincoln. And that was before this team really started to put things together. They're battling Michigan for the 4th-place spot in the Big Ten standings, which means double bye in the Big Ten postseason tournament. Nebraska, a lot to play for. I think Tim Miles keeps James Palmer Jr., Isaiah Roby, the whole gang on their game in this particular game, and they knock off Penn State and Lincoln on a Sunday. Nebraska minus the points, my podcast best bet. Listen, I want to say thanks to all the guys who joined us tonight. Fun show. Having Lou, you can follow him at GambLou, doing his UFC thing, one of the best in the business. Aaron Brewski, we're going to have him on quite a bit as we continue this podcast throughout the basketball season. Follow him at Aaron Brewski. For the gang in studio, for Mark Seidel at the controls, I'm Scott. We'll be back next Thursday night for another edition of Wager Talk. You know the drill. Put your week into the win column. We'll talk to you next week.
And I bid you good night. Good night. Good night.
I'll catch you on the flip side.